So thank you for staying. And thank you, Clive, for taking the hard part with the slide thing. He never does that. He played the sales guy here. He's a techie. He's a deep techie. So thank you for that. What I'll try to do now is walk you through things that Clive mentioned in a way which is a story around using Sentinel. So it's not just about feature by feature, but more about going through the SIEM life cycle, so to speak. It is still a presentation. It's still limited to an hour, so I'll take shortcuts. I'll play around and move. I just prepared that for now thing. You'll have to bear with me, but I hope it'll be useful to you. You are guinea pigs, so it's a new script I created to try on you. Bear with me if things don't work as I expected. Let's start back though. So my name is Ofer. That's the easy part, O-F-E-R. Use the word with a double F, Ofer. It's closer to how you pronounce that. Forget the last name, it's too hard. Sound Chinese, I'm not. And I'm from Israel, as those who get the accents can identify. Just to mention, Microsoft has a very large development center in Israel focused on cybersecurity. Actually, Microsoft cybersecurity comes from Israel. And I'm part of that. I joined Microsoft for the Sentinel project because my background is SIEM. I've been doing SIEM for many years. Actually, I met here people today who've met me when I was still at ArcSight. I was doing first research and then product management, and later I was the product director for EMEA for HP ArcSight. So I've seen both successful SIEM implementations and even a few failed ones. And I know the pains and the glory of what SIEMs are. We can have tons of discussion about that. Today I'm more into demoing Sentinel for you. And I'd love to keep the conversation. We have Clive today. We actually have Yaron here. Yaron is from our research team. He joined me for our trip to the UK. We have others in the UK which are Sentinel experts and weren't able to make it today. Who here in the room is a partner? You're all partners. Let's hug each other. You're right. People who make their living by implementing security products for Microsoft and for others. Okay. So we have a lot of partners here. Many of them are become very experienced in Sentinel. Sometimes they are the best way for you to get more experience with Sentinel. It's something I mentioned I know a bit or two about SIEM. SIEM is a journey. We sell you the best technology ever, but SIEM is not technology. SIEM is the thing that powers your SOC, and SOC is people and processes. There's way more beyond just the technology that I can provide to you, and that requires expertise. You may be the experts. I want to ask who is the SIEM expert here. And some will really benefit from having a partner work with you. Anyways, so let's start. So I have a question for you. What is a SIEM for? Sorry? What is a SIEM for? What's the goal of a SIEM? Why do you need a SIEM to start with? Detection, okay. Correlation is a technology. It's not a mean by itself. Excuse me? Right, thank you. But all true, by the way. For? That's a great one, actually. You want to say something else, Jay? Visibility. I'll stop here because everybody was right. Okay? It does mean it's a tough one. Just summarizing, there was detection. Keep in mind the detection, though, is the outlier because detection is done by a lot of tools. And we need to make sure that we share responsibility well. And then there was correlation, which is the type of detection which is specifically for a SIEM because it's taking information from multiple sources, which are not each one of them available, knows everything, and correlating them into detection, which is across sources. And then there was security management, of course, and incident management, which is where you need the operating system for the SOC, something where you really work out the incidents. And lastly, there was the human part, which I really like, because some people like to make a SIEM into an Uber IPS, so something that automatically does everything. And it's a goal. It's true, it's good, but SIEM is the system that requires a human by definition. It's there for the analysts in the SOC. And this tension between minimizing human intervention, which is a cost-saving thing, while still this is the system where humans do intervene, is an interesting one. So I'll try to take you through the story of doing that with Sentinel. We'll start with talking about detection. And I'll talk about how to define a detection rule. I'll mention a few other ways to do detection. We'll see a bit of KQL. You'll see interesting stuff that you can do with KQL and how it relates to legacy SIEMs. And then we'll move into incident management. We'll talk about how you can investigate an incident once it was detected, how you can manage the incident, assign, things like that. And then we'll dive into automation and what you can do in order to minimize, well, I mentioned that automation is a goal, even though humans are involved, but minimize the human intervention, save money, and use automation in order to make your life easier. Lastly, I'll talk about hunting. Time permits. Hunting is, well, for me it's new. I'll put it this way. I think everybody loves to talk about hunting. It's a worthwhile one. It's also a challenging one because hunting means that it's sports. Keep in mind, hunting is about rabbits and foxes, and it's time-consuming for aristocrats. And hunting in our world is something we need to well define. I'm not sure I'll do it here, but I'll show you things you can do for hunting with Sentinel. So, with no further ado, let's go into, there's one element I'm not going to show you because it sort of doesn't work well in this context, and that's collecting data. Everything we do relies on collecting data. There's tons of, that's where the architecture gets in. That's where getting data from on-prem devices is really a pain for everyone. Very good topic, not today. So I'll start with doing something with the data. And let's go to analytics. And analytics is where we have our built-in detections. And do I have that here working? Yeah, that's so great. Here is where you define alert rules or correlation rules in this respect. That's also where you can turn on and off the built-in machine learning that we have. And we'll see one or two more uses that are here in order for you to create detections as a general term. Initially when we created it, I wanted to just create rule and start typing one. But something we finally introduced with GA was built-in rules. They were available before that. We are big believers in open source. That's why we bought GitHub. And all the detections are first created in the GitHub, as Clive mentioned before. Now they're in the product. And we'll focus today on the log-on story, okay? So we look for built-in log-on rules. Oh, not enough resolution. Oh, let's do zoom out. So you'll see more stuff, and then I'll do zoom in when needed to make sure that you actually see something. So that's funny, I have to hold the mouse so you can see things. So those are the built-in log-on rules that we have today. So I wanted to try to write a brute force one, but there are many built-ins. Today we made a decision, and Yaron, who's in charge of that, informed me today that we are looking into changing that a bit, that no rules are on by default. So even though they are here, you need to enable them. We are looking into being bolder and making sure that a few are on by default, or even a lot, whenever we are sure that you don't have to tune them beforehand. So I'll pick one. There are many interesting ones here. You can see, and I'll go that they're all categorized by MITRE tactic. Here most would be credential access or multiple ones, so credential access as well as initial access. And also the data source that they require. So you can filter and see what we have here based on your need. I'll pick one which I just feel comfortable with, is failed host logons, but a success logon to Azure AD, which is a good example of correlation for that matter, because it's multiple sources and it's an interesting use case. I mean, between on-prem and the cloud, we have similar ones for Amazon as well. We support AWS as well. It's not an Azure thing. I'll go into this one. I'll create a rule. The rule will be created on the template. That's the built-in content. There's descriptive text you can modify here. I mentioned the MITRE tactic, etc. And then there's the rule logic. And that's where I want to focus for a moment, okay? And sort of discuss how things are done in Sentinel. So Sentinel is query-based SIEM. Talking about other products, it's very different than what I tend to call legacy SIEMs. Forgive me if you feel differently. So the ArcSights and Curators of the world, which are event-driven SIEMs. In query-based SIEMs, you write a query that can look back on all the data when it's executed in a scheduled manner, which in my mind, and I've been to both, is an easier way to experience things. We'll see it now. It does mean that you need, if you are writing rules for the ArcSights of the world, you'll have to change your paradigm and mindset. You're so used to writing rules that update active lists, that look up into active lists, and here it's one query. It's longer, but it's single, and it can look at all the data. Okay, let's take this query, and for presentation purpose, I'll move it here so you can see things. And then zoom in, which is probably, I can zoom in like that. Okay, so what is the rule about? And keep in mind, that's a complex, relatively complex relation that we wrote. It might look a bit long, complex to start with. I don't think it is that way. I have to admit, I hear mixed notions about it. Usually people that have spent a bit of time with that are very happy. It's easy. It allows you this Splunk-like pipeline-based syntax, but it's also more SQL-ish, so it's sort of easier for people who like SQL. You can see that it's very structured, so you can add the likes of comments and parameters, so it's parameter-driven. What do we see here? So we see here that we have two sources we address. In this case, the parsing is actually done as part of the query. Up here, we take Windows security events. We just select failed logins. That's the filter for those. Here we take syslog from Unix sources, and we take out the failed logins. All we need from them is actually the IP addresses associated. So the only thing that we keep from each one of those is the summarize make list IP address. I had today a meeting with an ArcSight shop. They asked me about active lists and how do you do lists and how do you maintain them and push. And here within the query itself, you generate the list of IPs that are relevant for logins over the time of analysis. So we have those two lists of IP addresses, one for Linux and one for Windows. And then, oh, amazing stuff. How do I go down, though? And then the primary line, which is of importance, is this one. Don't do demos on a tilted screen. Anyways. So the important line here would be this one, which is where we just check where the IP addresses that are found in the sign-in logs from Azure Active Directory are either found in the Win fails or in the Unix fails IP addresses. So There's a bit of getting the right data in, finding the right IP addresses, but mostly the correlation rule is pretty easy. And that's quite a lot of work, getting back and looking into failed IP addresses over time and then comparing either to the same period of time for Azure Active Directory or for just the recent hour or recent 5 minutes if you want. So that's how you write a rule. I'll go back to the rule generation stuff. There's another important aspect that you have to do here. We'll see a lot about it later, which is entities. To make sure that we'll see later on how you investigate within Sentinel, and it's all entity-driven. And to make sure that when we have, for example, Microsoft alerts from the likes of Microsoft Cloud Application Security or Windows Defender ATP, the alerts come with a lot of entities that are used for investigation. If you create your own custom alert, you have to make sure that you map entities. Those might be fields that are available in the events that you have correlated, but it's also very easy to extend, to do any, as part of the alert rule, any evaluation, any calculation, and create a calculated entity if the original data is in the raw format, for example. Excuse me? That's not VB and not C#. That's KQL. That's our query language. It's a query language. It's still a programming language. Okay. Again, it's similar. It's somewhere between SPL, for those who don't know, it's Splunk query language, and SQL. It's for getting data. It's for processing data. It's not programming. No. There's no drag and drop here. There's autocomplete. I didn't show it here. There's color coding, but it's not drag and drop. Clive did mention, it's important to repeat it now. Since it's not a programming language, it's much easier than that. It does carry you very far away. I'll show you a frightening one if you want. One of those that it's actually also available within the product, but it's just easier for me to show you in the GitHub. I'm always a bit frightened to show this one because it shows you how complex things can get. You don't have to do that. That's the things we do for you. Our research team, Yaron there, is writing those for you. So that's a detection query. It's about detecting anomalous sign-in locations. So it's geolocation in essence, again, logins. I did promise to make it easier for you. So per user and per authenticated application within Azure AD, in this case, we are looking for anomalous sign-in logs. And if we go down, what would be the best way? Oh, actually, there's that, I think, which is real time. So if we go down here, you'll see that the trick here that we use is a function called make series, which take a query that you created and bucketize it into time. The make series is analyzed using a series fit line. So we actually have a function that can go over the data that was collected in the query and find the best matching slope. And then we check if the slope was indicative. And actually, it's checked here for 14 days, for 7 days, for 1 day. And if 1 day is a high slope and 7 and 14 a low slope, we alert on that. So you can do a very sophisticated queries that do very sophisticated detection. Leave that to the experts, unless you want to be an expert. You can do midway, which is the correlation rule I showed you around Unix, Windows, and AAD. And you can do simple stuff. If you just want to alert on anything whenever somebody clears the Windows event log, that's very easy. Something that's always there. I can show you, actually it's pretty interesting. I hope I have the link here. I wasn't going to show that. Another GitHub. So there's a team from Deloitte in Germany. They created large number of rules for Sentinel. They are using sysmon events and implement sysmon detection for the MITRE attack tool framework. I actually added here a dashboard. That's nice. There's a whole text here. You can go into that. But if I go to the detections themselves, there's a very large number of detections, all of them useful to you. They're usually, and I'm picking one. Is there the one about clear? Clear command history. Okay, let's see that one. So you can see this is a relatively simple one. Well documented, but actually just checks if some sort of event happened. So that's a simple example of a simple rule within a large framework. They have 150 rules here, as far as I recall, or that are implementing that. Okay, let's move on. Session expired. I should move faster. That's the. So we've been into analytics, and we looked into log on. I'll now show there's a typo that I should probably have people correct. If I do log in, you'll see that we also have a machine learning based rule for SSH detection. The reason is that we have a lot of knowledge about SSH. It's the #1 attack vector against Azure, not against Sentinel, of course. And therefore, our research team, who's also protecting Azure, have developed a lot of knowledge around how to detect without false positives SSH, which is beyond query language. So behind the scenes, they have a Spark-based system that goes through the entire event stream for all customers and ensures a very little false positive rate, if at all, for specifically SSH. There are a few others like that. So that's also about. Now, you got an incident. You want to work it out. You want to manage incidents. One thing I do want to show, which I forgot, it's important here. When we get a Microsoft alert, it can be automatically elevated to be an incident. So you can get Microsoft Cloud Application Security, MCAS alerts, and get them into incidents without creating a rule. Okay? You can create a rule if you want to manage the incidents, if you want to make sure that less incidents are created. If you know that you get too many alerts from one source, you create an alert rule that will filter them out. If you want to get most of them, you can create a rule for, say, that would be Azure Security Center, so it's an alert source, and you select specific priorities you want to create rules on, incidents on, and then maybe the specific alerts you want to make sure are elevated to be incidents. All that means that we have to go into incidents. I'll play with zoom size, maybe it'll be better that way. So we have incidents. One of the big challenges with demoing is screen sizes. And incidents is what the analyst actually sees. So we created a rule or used our machine learning, you'll get here, and that's where you manage incidents. Now, if I take, whatever, incident, you can go and see, you can see that it has a severity that the analyst can change. You can change status and mark progress. You can assign it to others. So we have a level of incident management within Sentinel. One thing that we are never sure about is how much you want to manage the incidents to the end here in Sentinel and how much you want to go to take into your ticketing system. There is a capability to do two-way integration with ticketing systems. I'll describe that a bit later when I talk about automation. If I go to the full details, you'll see that I can also write a comment. This is a really interesting one. And those are collected here. And then, if it's interesting, it should probably be high. And then I can, change to in progress and apply it to someone. But that's not the data. You want to do something about actually investigating, not just measuring. So you can go to the actual alert data. But let's move and show you a nicer way to investigate the incidents. Since demo data is never good, I'm going to use a specific demo that we have created for that. That has a better set of data to investigate in the first place. So same screen, same alerts. There's one added here that has nicer demo data, anomalous login. Again, the same set of stories we've discussed about login detection, login brute force detection. And now I can also do not just view full details, but also investigate. And when I do investigate, you can use our new graph-based investigation system. It's something we invested a lot in because, as someone there mentioned, we believe that detection is just one role of a SIEM, and investigation is a very important other aspect of a SIEM. It's not just about graphs. Graphs are very important and are very visual, but there's also information here, such as timeline. We see how it evolves as we move on with the investigation. There's also information about the alert. So we can see that this is a scheduled alert that was created by a rule, maybe not the smartest rule, in this case, a Sentinel rule. The one I did not write because I used much better out-of-the-box rules, but that one of your customers or you may have, which looks for a large number of failed login events. And I did it the other day. Somebody mentioned to me that we should have added a check for the login type. He's right, but we didn't do that here. Anyways, it's suspicious, but not more than that. Might be, password expired for a service account. That would create the same thing. How do we go about it? So we know that Darcy Robles tried to access RD3020 many times over a short period of time and failed. Let's try. Let's see what are the top 5 hosts that Darcy usually uses. And, we see the top 5 hosts. They're not RD3020, so a little more suspicious. It's also the starting point for investigating further. If we do decide that this is a real issue, those are suspected as compromised, of course, so we'll go further with them. But let's look at related alerts for Darcy Robles. So other things that were noted on him. And we'll see, and all that is, you can sort it out. We are working to make sorting a bit easier. And then I can do it better so you can see in the small screen. And we see that Darcy Robles was actually involved in, thank you, another reason not to have those strange tables. So we can see here that there was also a suspicious partial alert for Darcy Robles. And we made a choice of not opening twice, so you have to manually go and do related entities. And we see that actually the suspicious partial was also on the same machine. So potentially more interesting. We can also go and see what the actual partial was. And if I go back to the suspicious partial alert itself, we can see that it was created by Azure Security Center. So that's an external alert. It wasn't detected by Sentinel. That's where we combine alerts from multiple sources in order to create a story or an investigation capability. For those who don't know, in this case, Azure Security Center, which is Microsoft product for the special system for protecting Azure, is using Windows Defender ATP on Azure-based machines. So it's an Azure Windows Defender ATP detection. And we can also see here that that there were anomalous sign-ins. Let's look at where they were to. So the same user that sort of did anomalous login to the first system, RD3020, and then this suspicious PowerShell also touched later on, we'll see whether later on, it's an important question, further computers that are probably now in bad shape. And lastly, we see our CASB solution, Microsoft Cloud Security, generating a mass download alert, in this case to, let's see, where, Box. Now, all that is a very good way to progress forward. The actual graph, even when I zoom out and you see nothing, tends to be a bit too much. You can kill those. They may be not important anymore, so there's a lot about playing around. But importantly, you can also have a timeline view, a story of how things folded. Okay? And when you use each one of those, you actually get the relevant part of the graph to easier see them. And sorry, it's small for you. You know, a typical analyst screen is a bit larger than what you see from 20 yards in the meeting room. And we see anomalous login was the first one, the original alert we found. And then there was the suspicious PowerShell activity. Somebody did a privilege escalation. And then the sign-in further to multiple computers, that's lateral movement. And lastly, exfiltration. So this was, for a long time, we showed this demo. It was, you know, we still didn't release the feature in full. We did release it this summer. And we have now many hundreds of customers using that. And in real life, it finds things. Keep in mind, it's not automated detection. That's elsewhere. I discussed that before. That's investigation. That's where an analyst sits, sees an alert that it's hard to make a decision on, and wants to triage it. He wants to make a decision on that. And usually, that's one of the challenges where I still keep using the same demo. On demo data, it's hard to see things. When you get to large implementations where you really have alerts, entities are mapped, when you activate all the built-in content, it starts flowering. It looks flowering. So that's important. That said, I mentioned before the tension between a human system that's for humans and the idea that you want to have humans do less. And that's investigation versus automation. So the next step you want to do is you want to make sure that automation reduces the amount of work needed. For that, we have, as Clive hinted at, actually, before I go, yeah, I'll start with automation. I'm playing with the sequence. I want to display, to present workbooks as well, but it will be the next step. So I'll pick a playbook, and I'll show it to you. Playbooks are based on an existing Microsoft technology called Logic Apps. If you know Microsoft Flow, that's the user space, the consumer version. Logic Apps is the enterprise version that works well within Azure, with the whole Azure ownership and resources model. And let's talk about this alert about anomalous login that you just got. Okay? And you want to do something about it. What would you want to do first? And first of all, the playbooks are run from two places. They can run. You can set any alert when detected to run a playbook automatically. So do something before it ever hits an analyst. And you can also have an analyst run playbooks doing roughly the same thing as a decision. So we'll talk about running a workflow, asking someone to answer things. An analyst can make a decision, or it can be done automatically when you trigger the alert. So the first thing you'll have here in a playbook would be the trigger. Playbooks, in essence, are programming. It's just simple programming targeted at automation. Behind the scenes, there's pseudocode, but it's easier to write it this way. And you use building blocks, which we call connectors, in this case, automation connectors, which do things. They automate. The first thing you need is a trigger. The trigger for Sentinel, the trigger you have to start a playbook for Sentinel with, would be the Sentinel trigger. Today, the Sentinel trigger implies that it was run off an alert, manually or automatically, and will populate the alert information in the playbook. So the playbook can utilize the alert information. We'll see in a moment how you can do that. We are working to add also the ability to run it on a user directly. Today, if user is within an alert, you get user information, but on a user directly. The first use for playbooks, which still doesn't reduce the amount of time or the cost of an incident, is integration. I mentioned that many of you will want to use an external ticketing system. ServiceNow is probably the most common one. And you can certainly open a ticket in ServiceNow based on the information in the alert. Very common use cases, many people do that. The opposite is also possible. So I mentioned a playbook that starts with a trigger from Sentinel, but the playbook can start by a trigger from any system. Actually, each playbook has a REST API endpoint for itself whenever you create it. So you can, whenever there is a change in ServiceNow, somebody closed the ticket in ServiceNow, you can run the playbook, which will automatically close the incident in Sentinel on the other side. Okay? So you can do that. But next, you want to really save time. You want to do something which actually reduces the amount of work in the SOC. What you can do here is many different things. I'll start with one. The first one would be to ask. Usually, the first thing an analyst does, if it's not clear false positive, is to get more data. Getting more data might be asking someone, or it might be enriching, getting more data from an external system. Both can be done with automation very easily. I won't show it here, so I'll mention it's very easy to go out to any external system using a connector, get additional data, and put it back in the workspace so it can be analyzed as part of the investigation. But I'll show another one, which is sending an email. You want to ask someone, the basic question is, was it you? Was it approved by you? Whatever your playbook in terms of the general term allows you, calls you to do. And the email will be sent. Now, the email is not a static email. It has options here. And in the subject, you can include any information that was actually received before. One thing that this playbook does not do well, and I'll show you how to do it well, is that in here, there is actually no user to send to. So it might be an administrator that you want to ask a fixed name, or a name that you fetch from Active Directory. There's a connector to fetch information from Active Directory here. But let's assume that you want to send it to the alert, to the users mentioned in the alert for verification. What you'll have to add here would be an action. And it's a Sentinel action. And the Sentinel would be get accounts, getting accounts from the alert. While here, I'll also show you, because I'm probably not going to edit later, that you can also do an action to add a comment to incident. So a playbook can do nothing but get data from an external source and add it as a comment to the incident so the analyst is aware of that. A very good way to do simple enrichment when you just, get me some answer. You can also change the status. Probably the most effective way to save money. If the playbook can make the decision that this is not important, either lower the severity or just close the incident. You just saved a lot of money. But let's focus back on get accounts. And once I did that, I need to add here entities. And once I have that, when I go to the approval email, and I go to the to field, I don't have to have a fixed value as I had so far. I can go to the get accounts one, see more, and get, which one would be the best way? I probably have to do principal name suffix. I need to do account name plus principal name suffix. I'll use the UPN suffix for now to not be. Now, something interesting just happened, and it's part of things doing things for you. An alert can address multiple accounts. So you may need to send the email to many different people. So once I added accounts, which is a list, the send approval email thing got to be included into a for each loop. Automatically. And then account UPN is not the right email. I need to do an expression to get the full email. I'll leave that out. Anyways, once the email is sent, you can apply a condition which would act on the results of the email. The email essentially will include in the session variable on the right the option that the user selected, and then you can act accordingly. So if false, if the answer from the user was, and this is a simplistic case. This case means true or false. You can have a multi-option to the approver, and you can say, yes, I want you to look at that, and then you'll make the severity higher. And you can say, leave it for later, or I did it, it's fine. You can have a lot of branches. Say it's just true or false. The user just landed in Kuala Lumpur, and he got an email, are you in Kuala Lumpur? And he answers, yes. So that means it's false, and then you can close the case, just saving a lot of money, and close the incident service now as well. On the other hand, if the user said, I'm not in Kuala Lumpur, you can do whatever you want. You can block the user, which is probably something you'll never do. Nobody ever does real blocking. But you can move the user to multi-factor authentication, which is a very easy way to do it. And it's usually just adding into the right user group in Active Directory and available connector. Or you can block the IP came from because it's a Kuala Lumpurian IP. He wasn't there. Somebody is abusing it. Okay? If you don't have the right connector within Logic Apps, okay, everything I showed you doesn't work well. It's very easy to extend. You can write an API connector that will call any HTTP REST API. Just fill in either have a Swagger definition or fill in the HTTP parameters. And naturally, they can be based on and then the IP address, it's small, I'll make it larger once I finish. The IP address really taken from the information here. So you can define that. You can write code as a connector using Azure Functions. All that is serverless. And it does work also on-prem using an on-prem proxy. So even though we are cloud, you can automate on-prem. So we don't have a lot of time. I want to move forward. This was sort of the flow of we create an alert rule or use the built-in KQL-based alerts or use machine learning to get a detection or get detection from an external source. In this case, we had a few Microsoft sources providing that. That's a detection use case you mentioned. Then you want to investigate the alerts and manage them. We have built a full system around investigation. Which we think is innovative. A lot of work was invested there. There's a lot to learn beyond what I did today. You can also investigate using search if you're a search guru. I'll get to that when I show hunting in a few seconds. And lastly, you want to save money by reducing the number of investigations you do and by providing more information to the analyst so you can do automation that can add data, comment to the incident, more data, enrichment data to the workspace to be used as part of the search, or close the case, or lower the severity, or whatever the playbook enables you to achieve. Now, the next thing I'll show you is about hunting. It's about starting from scratch, no incident. And I'll show you two ways to do that. One would be the more common structured way around dashboards. And I'll show you the power of dashboards. It will show you, and that's why I thought about doing it earlier, visualization. Dashboards are not important just for, we are talking about security here, but we have managers, they want to see things, and it has to be visual, so dashboards. And the second one would be our hunting interface, which is a process of actually doing very organized hunting based on queries that we provide, our know-how. Let's start with workbooks, which are our dashboards. And I'll pick, because we're into sign-ins, and that was my story throughout, I'll pick one which is about 80 sign-ins. So that's an overview of sign-ins for AD. It's fully interactive. So you can select its Azure Active Directory. You can select just specific applications you want to see the logins for. You can go for a specific user, okay, etc. And you can also filter interactively. For example, I want just failures. Make sense? I mean, that's what I'm into. And then everything else will match accordingly and move around. And you see pretty nice visualizations for the managers. And then, we'll look into, I know those countries, but whoever came from France? Well, no, France. I won't do practice jokes today. So let's talk about somewhere very far in India, okay? So let's talk about India. And if I select India, I get those from India. And I do find out that all of them are Alex Wilbur. But if I go elsewhere, let's look at the US, we'll see that most are still Alex Wilbur, but not everyone. So the reason behind it, naturally, there's something around Alex Wilbur. I'll explain why Alex Wilbur is so common here. It's a security breach, but it's closed. These are demo tenant, and when we started, we did a stupid thing of having a fixed username and password for everyone in Microsoft, which was just easy. And actually, we didn't have technology to do it differently because it's a separate tenant, and we didn't want to manage for thousands of people doing demos in Microsoft system. Then we introduced a technology called Lighthouse, which enabled us to connect the demo tenant to the Microsoft tenant so that users can use their Microsoft credentials in order to use it here. And that was just in time because the Alex Wilbur user leaked. So we had to block it. So now it's blocked, but people are trying to use it. So it's a demo tenant. We don't have to really spend much effort on going after those that are abusing it. Not that important. On the other hand, when you investigate, you want to not look into Alex Wilbur's. We know what that is. You want the other failures. How would you go around that? So here I can actually go into the actual query behind. I can go into the actual query behind. I'll try again. Demos are demos. I'll try once more and then I'll move to something else. Okay, trying once more always works nicely. And then, I didn't have just failed once, which means now I have everyone and I don't have my Alex Wilbur. So let's try it manually. I'll edit the end and I'll make it larger for you in a second. Where user not equal Alex Wilbur, was it? Let's start with equal, so I'll see if I got the right one. It's Wilbur. I always like people that notice the details and help me so much. Thank you, guys. Okay, why just one? That's sort of funny. Well, that's what I want to, I know why, because it's a specific city. Okay, so let's take this one, or actually do the not equal here, and go back to here. And now I'll do something different. I'll do edit. You can edit those. And I can fix my query to make sure that I don't get any Alex Wilbur's. And I'll run the query just to see that the query actually is fine. And I'll do done editing. And then now if I do the exercise again, do failures only, and I go to the US, I get just what I'm after. So I fixed the interactivity. I have an interface which is an investigation hunting interface, used specifically for signing logs. It's a level 1, level 2 interface, and then if I need to fix it for them because I have a known issue, very interactive, you can change the dashboards easily and find that. Now,
why the camera haven't been updated?
On the left side?
Oh, yeah, it was 27 before, 27 now.
Yes, because I didn't change this one.
Ah, okay.
I have to change this one as well. I took a shortcut. Now, saying that, let's finish with a more advanced hunting. So we have a hunting blade here. And if you go to the hunting blade, you can actually see a large number of queries that we've prepared for you. You can select your campaign today, what you're after. You can select specific MITRE tactic you want to go after today. You can go again into our credential access one, okay, and run just those. You can focus on data sources you want to focus on, your firewalls, whatever. And then you can run the queries. You can mark queries that you want to always run, your favorites, like that. And then when you'll get to, whenever you actually enter hunting, they'll be run automatically. Or you can run all queries that are selected now by one of the filters. And that's actually a pretty neat feature that it's just queries. But they require a lot of horsepower, and that's where cloud really helps, running those heavy queries across the board in a very short time, and seeing the results immediately as to what makes sense and what you need to look into. In this case, 9 was the most. For VIP accounts, more than 6 failover, in 10, I guess, in 10 accesses, and I can go and view the results. And go from there. It's a framework for hunting. It allows you to, your campaigns around the specific subset that you want. We have a large number of hunting queries that we provide to you. So we have a starting point for your hunting practice. You can add additional queries as well. So you're not limited, and you can add to the same framework additional queries the same way you add detection rules. The rule of the game is sort of the hunting queries are those that will produce less validated output. There are starting points. There are things that you want to hunt for. If anything, you get to be consistently returning results that are important. It probably should be promoted and translated into a detection query. That's how we internally work. So things here where we gather enough experience around, we'll move to be detection queries once we know that every alert counts. The last thing I'll show you, it's sort of just neat. If we go back to hunting, there's something called bookmarks here. Bookmarks are the hidden gem within Sentinel. Bookmarks are artifacts. You do hunting or you do investigation, bookmarks. And I'm sorry, I was very inconsistent around doing zooming. My apologies for that. Bookmarks are a hidden gem. What they allow you is they allow you to mark any result of a search as an artifact, as something you want to keep further. And let's go through how to do that with a bit of details here. So I'll go into search. I'll select a specific table that's actually the security alert table, because I know that it's nicer for the demo, actually. Security alert is where we store all the alerts that we actually either generate or that we receive from external sources. And you see here that you have different alerts. Some were created by rules, some are created by external sources. I'll try to focus on one which is from, I lost the ones I like, it's wrong. Oh, it's right, Tenant. I'll pick one, not my best one, because I prefer those. Okay, I'll do this one. Not the best I usually use, but no, it would not work very nicely for me. So, okay, that's the one I really like. So now I want Microsoft Cloud App Security ones. It's a funny one, that's not really. Anyways, I'll pick one which is just anyone for the demo purposes. In a demo environment, you get what you get. All the Alex Wilbers that are using the system. So I'll pick one. And I'll want to mark specifically this one. So I'll take the vendor original ID and I'll add it to the query. So now I have a specific alert that I marked, actually two in this case. And I want to bookmark them. And you do it here. And you actually create, Ofer, London, Meetup, bookmark. And then for a bookmark to be valuable, you have to add metadata to remember why those events or alerts were important to you, tag it, and then also add entities. Remember that entities are the base for everything we do, for investigation. So I want to add, say, an account. But if I go here, you'll see that actually if we go into the details, I'll spare you the search. There's no available account or IP address. Because everything is within, actually hostname would be a better one to take, because all the details are actually within the entities of the alert. So the question is, how do we take this data out so we can tag the entities with the right information? And to do that, you have to extract the value. And recently, we have added a nice feature that enables you to just extract the value to be useful. KQL is very powerful, but sometimes you have to know your way around it. Here, I essentially was able to extract a JSON field from an embedded JSON in a very speedy manner to use further. It might be for the bookmark, it can also be for analytics, for detection, for whatever. In general, one of the great things about Sentinel is that it can get any type of data in without you pre-processing it. We can pre-process it, but if you didn't, it's fine. You'll find that in the cloud world, JSON is very common. The data might be in CSV format, might be in XML, okay? And sometimes it was parsed beforehand. Sometimes you just want to not spend time beforehand, you want to get it in. And then you can use it like that. And KQL, our query language, can parse anything in any way. And a bit of example, you might have seen the rule I did about syslog before. But if it's JSON, this is a very easy way to do. And it's very common in the cloud world that we work on. Now, if I run the query again, you'll see that now we have a hostname column. So a new virtual column just added out of a very complex JSON in 2 clicks. And if I add a bookmark now, I can have the hostname field down here, and I can now, let's do London Sentinel Meetup, and I can save it. Now, what are bookmarks for? It's an artifact, it's something that I need to use somehow. So it currently is in our hunting blade, though I need to say it's way more general than that. And if I go here to bookmarks, and I have my new bookmark, I can do many different things with it. First of all, I can add it to an incident. So now I can add the bookmark as an artifact, as part of an investigation. I found something important, I bookmarked it, and I can make it available as part of an incident. I can actually create a new incident based on the bookmark. So I did hunting. I want the hunting to become an incident because I found something. What I'll do is, as part of the hunting, I found some piece of information. I'll bookmark it. I create a new incident. Then you can do everything that you do around an incident, just like any other incident. And the last thing I can do, which is to investigate it. So it's our first entry into doing. Sorry, that's the demo data that I used before. I'll go to the full system with no demo data. And I'll go back into my Lone Sunday Meetup bookmark. So now I can actually investigate it. Whether it would do anything or not, demo data. I'm not sure there are any related alerts for, actually related alerts. So now we need to investigate. So essentially for the host I selected as part of my bookmark, there were other alerts, so that's already a starting point for actually looking into what's going on, etc. I looked into this one. It was pretty random. So trying to sum up, this was deep. So thanks for staying with me and keeping attention. I tried to show a few things here. I tried to show the features of Sentinel, but not as a feature set, a feature list, but as a workflow. So we started by talking about detection. I talked about alert rules, about correlation, the thing that you know you want to do in a SIEM, and the way we do it as a query. It's a different mindset for those that came from event-based SIEMs. For those that came from Splunk, it's a bit more similar. I tried to impress you with the power of KQL. I hope I didn't impress you too much and you didn't go to look for a shelter. It is powerful. I do think that it's not, the starting point, starting is not very hard. I probably should push more on the simple examples as well. Usually what you find in SIEM tools, as we're now in the process of converting a large number of curator rules, actually the built-in ones because the customer wants them as well as their custom ones. And most of them come to be one-liners in KQL. But you can also do the more important ones. I showed the middle one about the correlation and the large one about behavioral analytics using KQL. Detection can also come from our machine learning models. Detection can come from external sources. Then you want to investigate and manage them. In this respect, I show you how you can investigate using our graph capability. I did not drill down a lot on investigating using search. It's just not very visual. It's a lot of search. As well as manage the incident, either internally within Sentinel by commenting, assigning, changing priority, changing status, or by integrating with an external system, which works pretty nicely. And then moving from the human aspect to less human aspect, there's automation. Automation works very nicely in Sentinel. I think that standalone source systems are on par. They do roughly the same, but they're not as well integrated. And what we find when people do Sentinel is that they extend the normal use case development cycle. If in the past it was get the data in and write correlation rules, now it's get the data in, write correlation rules, and automation. It's just there. It's one of those, because it's there, people use it. It's very convenient. It works, it integrates well, and it saves time and energy because automation is helpful. People actually sometimes just take Sentinel for the automation side because it's there and it's very useful. So that's automation. Then I moved from the incident-based SOC workflow into the hunting workflow, which is when you want to investigate data based on some external triggers rather than an incident. And I've presented two ways to do it in Sentinel. One of them would be using workbooks or dashboards. It's also a way to visualize things for management. And I showed you how you can, it's more of a paradigm of the experts doing it for the level 1, level 2 analysts, and then fixing things on them. And then the proper hunting methodology, which is running a large number of queries, investigating the results, bookmarking elements, and then creating incidents based on those bookmarks for further investigation. Probably another thing I didn't mention today If you want to go further, we have a few recorded webinars on that, as well as a lot of stuff on our blog. The next frontier, if you want to do hunting, would be something called Jupyter Notebooks, which is technology that does interactive playbooks. So instead of playbooks designed for automation, it's playbooks that are designed for analytics and visualization. They combine code parts, not in a graph chart format, but in Python, with output and text parts. And we've done a lot of work to integrate those into Sentinel. To data integration, you run them separately, but you have all the capabilities within the workbook to access the data and analyze it. As well as widgets, for example, that will manipulate the query for you interactively within the workbook, the notebook. We are going in the future to make it a bit like the workbook. You'll have a list of notebooks that you can select from, run, and update, as I did with the workbook. If workbooks are for the simpler stuff, for visualization, dashboarding, notebooks are for heavy, serious, analytic type hunting. The next frontier, a topic for my next trip here or for one of the real experts to show rather than me. So I do hope it was useful for you. Are you taking questions? We are, I see, I got it, I'm fine, yeah.
Basically, question around functionality. So
about
functionality of Sentinel. It mainly depends on the queries. However, what I have found, maybe in this version at least, slightly difficult is maintenance of those queries. So are there any plans to potentially introduce some sort of like a source control based queries when we can put a link to GitHub or to any other type of repository, so we will have a control over the queries, the Sentinel process, because obviously if someone will be changing the query, will make a mistake, query will become useless, so the whole system will become unreliable, and it will be no really easy way to identify what has changed and how to fix it easier, comparing to if it will be source control driven.
So correct, first of all, the pain, completely agree. Two things around that, none of them something, usually when I do a roadmap, people ask where's the timeline, and I say when I do roadmap, it's just things I know will be shipped in the next 6 months. So in this case, talking about GitHub synchronization is something we are thinking of, it's not there yet. There's something which is coming sooner and provides some of the answer to what you want, which is audit. So auditing activity that people do, so it's not maintained, it's not source control, but it means that if somebody changes things, you'll know about it, you can get alert on that. Audit will be within the workspace. You can write rules on the audit. The last thing that you can start using today would be, as I mentioned before in another context, it requires work. It's sort of, we provide you the tools that do yourself, is you use the API or PowerShell to do essentially the synchronization yourself from GitHub or whatever you want. Exactly. So we didn't build the synchronization as a built-in feature. The API is there for creating alerts or modifying alerts yourself. It can be done. It's not an answer I like because I think we should provide, I'll put it this way. Sentinel has a lot of power in it. Some of it is already available in easy-to-use manner. Some of it is use the API answers, which does mean we have to work more.
Like from my perspective, API should be potentially sufficient with ability to put Sentinel into read-only mode, so then it can be like enforced to be just source control driven via the API calls.
So the answer to that, that's actually possible using RBAC. It means that it's not really blocked. It means that just the user authorized to do the API or used by the API has the capability to update rules. You need.
What about multi-tenancy from an MSSP perspective? So if you had multiple customers, multiple Sentinel customers, so obviously in the ArcSight world, you've got smart connectors with customer names being tagged in Ceph. Is there any way to differentiate between customers in a single workspace at this point, or are they all individual workspaces? And I guess how would you get visibility across multiple customers?
Exactly. So our best practice for from MSSPs for supporting multiple customers, it's also relevant for organizations that may be distributed and have multiple separate entities, sub-entities, would be separate workspaces. Between the options, there are a lot of advantages in terms of data sovereignty, for example, in terms of managing offloading of customers. It does require us to provide you with a set of tools for centrally working on those customers. Some of it is available today, some is coming shortly, some later on. Specifically, today, cross-tenant data access, queries, hunting, workbooks, notebooks, all works. I did mention Lighthouse, which enabled us to kill the Alex Wilbur user. And that enables you today to create a workbook that displays alerts from all your customers in a single workbook. What's not working today are a few things that some are coming, some have workarounds, and at least one will take time. So the incident screen is way more than a workbook. And that today is per customer. We are working in the near future to have an incident screen where you see across customers. So a single pane of glass for your analyst. That's our top priority for MSSPs. We have a lot of MSSPs which are interested in the product. The second ask that we don't have a full answer, I'll go to the API again because it's the same, would be to maintain content across those. The solution for that today is API. So essentially automate deploying rules, workbooks, whatever. And the last one that will take time, less of an issue for MSSPs in most cases, though it's a valid requirement. Today, alert rules do not work across tenants. So the alert rule itself would not call a data from multiple tenants. It's a valid request, it's just lower priority than all the others in order to support MSSPs. They won't get to your...
So 2 questions. They're more around the future of Sentinel, so you might not answer them, but I'll ask them anyway. You know how you mentioned that they feed in from Defender ATP and MCAS? So at the moment, some of the problems is like once you close an incident in Sentinel, you then have to go into the portal to close it. Will there ever be something where it will like automate so it will know that it's an MCAS incident and close the alert in MCAS as well?
The other question?
The other question is, so you
No, I'm
mentioned...
just interested, I'll answer both.
You mentioned like Sentinel might become sort of an end-to-end case management sort of tool. So would you say that it would have more functionality, like you could search it for comments? Because at the moment we still use ServiceNow for detailed investigation so that other analysts can refer to it and search through it.
So in both cases, this is not a project in progress, so no roadmap commitment to be made. But they're very different. In the case of automatic closing alerts in the source systems, we want to have that. So we'll get to that, no future commitment. We actually do that today using Logic Apps. So when we are involved with customers, our customer success team are implementing those back links using APIs to those systems. And we may publish those playbooks. We started publishing playbooks in the GitHub, so we may be able in the near future to publish those playbooks as templates for you to use for this type of integration. With regard to case management, I don't know what's the right thing. I share with you that I remember a decade ago discussions at ArcSight as to how far should we go with ticketing. Because we'll never be a ServiceNow. And then there's some level you want to have within Sentinel. And we're debating how far to go. So if we have comments, probably searching comments is something we have to add to our backlog because we already committed to comments, so they have to be more useful. Whether we'll have multiple owners for an incident, probably not. We'll have to learn and gauge what you need. He's waiting for long.
Before I turn this on in my tenant, how can I get an estimate of what it's going to cost me? So if I've got 5,000 users hammering Azure AD for Office 365 services and 5,000 desktops running Defender ATP, running processes that's all flowing into this, what's my bill going to be?
That and that. So are you collecting the data today to the workspace as log analytics, or that you want to turn it on and start collecting?
It's all going into Security Center.
Okay. Most, because some things you cannot collect with Security Center, but actually the heavy loads you can. So if it goes to Security Center, it's a pretty simple exercise. We have a set of queries. He'll love to share them with you. I actually blogged about them.
Yes, there's a couple of articles on my blog.
Yeah.
And so there was one article, what to do if you have got the data in log analytics and how to get it out with a query. And there's another article of if you haven't got the data, what are your options? So there's a couple of ideas there about.
So everything you logged is deterministic. Everything you already logged, there's a cost to that is a number. Everything you don't log today might be more of a question. Once you turn it on, you have 30 days before you pay. So you can turn it on and try. Actually, we'll still have to take Clive's queries. We don't have a built-in system. It will be available at some point now, but you know how much data you collect, so we can help you have an answer on how much it costs for you. In practice, the Microsoft sources, Office 365, Azure AD, Office 365 is free by definition, are not a big producers. So that's not where event volume comes from. Event volume tend to come from Windows events. That would be so ASE events. And those are the things we have to understand how much you collect.
One of the challenges you probably know is every event's different, every user's different, every company's different. And so 3,000 users could be an average of 1 meg, the next company average of a gig, the next company average of a terabyte. And you might have one machine that does 10 terabytes, and that's it for the rest. So it's somewhat challenging, but we can get the data.
So in terms of device source, I know in Marketplace we can find most of the supported device source, but if we have a legacy device, can we have does Azure Sentinel has a tool to write custom parser or?
Okay, so first of all, and that's important. I think Clive mentioned that before. If you go to the actual product, you go to the page of connectors, it's too short. For different purposes, we run way faster than some of the elements, and a lot of what you can connect is actually in our blog posts. As Clive mentioned, it's a 4-part blog post, one covering Microsoft sources in the cloud, one Microsoft sources on-prem, one third-party source, and one custom connectors. So custom connector would be the one that you would want to follow. One thing to keep in mind is that parsers in our world are done within the workspace. They are KQL. But it explains there how to do them, how to, etc. But it's possible. They gotta get in raw to the workspace. You can see it in raw, and then you create a parser, which is sort of a view that lets you handle the data, as I did with the extract JSON. You need, yes.
The last question. Windows Defender ATP feeds in through Sentinel. How much of that functionality goes upstream? Because Defender ATP is a full EDR kind of platform where you can quarantine, do all activities, look at the processes. So how much is fed upstream?
There's a design decision we did so far, trying to, to split the roles between Microsoft products. We get a lot of feedback on that, and we are thinking how to change that, and I'll sort of share with you the challenges and ideas, and your input is great around that. Today, in most cases, with 2 exceptions, what you get from Microsoft threat detection products into Sentinel is just alerts. So it's just for alert management, which does bring the question of how do you investigate downstream, which will require you to go back to the system. With Defender ATP, for example, I think that their investigation experience is so much focused on endpoint that EDRs eventually would be very hard. We don't want to replicate that. That said, so that's what the way things are today. There are two challenges with that people are, voicing their requirements around. One of them, on the other one side, people say, I want all the data in. I want Sentinel to be aware of everything, even though the expert system is Defender ADP or Microsoft Cloud App Security or Azure ADP. I want the data to be available there for me for one-place investigation. The challenge with that is that we'll take money, it costs us more storage, and then there's double payment on the other side. And we are looking into how to best address the needs of a central location that does have view of everything versus not producing duplication. We don't have all the answers. Sometimes we did one decision I mentioned. You can get MCAS discovery logs into Sentinel today. It's a type of raw data. It's between this detection. Discovery logs is when MCAS, which is a CAS-based solution, detects that people are using non-sanctioned SaaS applications. We think, and probably the closest on our roadmap would be using MCAS as an event source because it's sort of very much SIEM-like activity that you want to process around essentially how do we collect Dropbox events. It would make sense to do it from MCAS rather than directly. So that's probably the next one. It's also volume-wise, the duplication there is not as bad. It's less events, okay, it's less data. The biggest hurdle would be Defender ATP because the amount of data is very large and because most of it is not event-oriented. In this case, we are looking into a way to enable you to query the Defender ATP data from Sentinel. You probably, if you use Defender ATP, you know it's KQL. And for those that ask behind the scenes, for those who don't know, KQL, which is Cousteau query language, is the language of a Microsoft big data analytics engine called Cousteau internally and Azure Data Explorer externally, which is what all the Microsoft products use behind the scenes in some way, shape, or form. So they're sure it's not easy for different reasons, a way to make you able to query Defender ATP from Sentinel. Without the duplication, we looked into that it's not easy. It is the same engine, it's used very differently, but it might be a solution we'll go into. So today, we made a choice, alerts only. We get a lot of feedback that you want cross-hunting, cross-search, and we are looking for ways to provide that. It was last. I was told it was last. I can stay here on the stage or outside in the street, or we can go to beers, a good power round, but I guess we have to close the main floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much to Cliff for the introduction of Azure Sentinel, and thank you so much, Ofer, for the deep dive and a really good insight into the product. And of course, thank you for you guys coming and going through like 2 hours of content. So thank you so much for the participation, and have a good evening and night.